What is going on, everybody? How are you guys doing today? Hope everybody's having a good week because it is Tuesday when I'm filming this. Thanksgiving's this week, so we're starting to cook in the house tomorrow, so it's gonna be smelling good. It's gonna be the vibes are gonna be high. Christmas stuff going up this week. My favorite time of the year. Fall time coming to an end, starting to move towards the winter stuff. I love it. I love it. Right in the mix of everything, right in the mix of all the holidays, right in the mix of college football head coaching searches, right in the middle of college football playoffs starting soon, NFL season starting to get towards the end, NBA season starting to get a little fun now, college basketball's in and fun. But anyways, we're going to be talking about a lot of head coaching stuff today because there are some updates that I will be talking about. So we'll just hop straight into that. So the first one that I do want to talk about is Florida State. If you've heard about that one, Mike Norvell is staying for the 2026 season. Florida State announced that Mike Norvell will be returning to be the head coach in 2026. I think this is a move that Florida State kind of had no choice but to make at the current moment because, you know, I think they screwed up on not making a move and making a firing earlier in the year. Norvell is 5-6 right now. This year's they've taken some pretty bad losses this year. Yeah, you got that big win over Alabama earlier in the year, and I think they're still trusting Norvell just because of that one win, I would say. And in that first season, if you look back when he had that really good season. But I mean, last season was horrific. This season is horrific, and you're just not performing up to the Florida State standard, and you're keeping them around again. Reason why I'm saying they screwed up is because or the reason why I'm saying that one, they screwed up, and two, I mean, you just can't fire him right now because the head coaching pool of teams with vacancies is so deep that you wouldn't be a top you wouldn't be a top three team in the mix, I would say, for some of the top coaches. Because you're competing with LSU, you're competing with Florida, you're competing with Auburn, Penn State, Arkansas, and even more. Um, for in a pool of coaches that isn't very deep, in my opinion, if I'm just being honest. There's a few big names, like, yeah, Lane Kiffin, but you're not going to be in the mix for Lane Kiffin. There's names, Eli Drinkwitz. I don't know if he would leave Missouri to go to Florida State. Maybe he would. But there's one name who really does stand out, but you can't get him anymore. And I think it was the perfect fit for FSU. I think they screwed up not making a firing earlier because I think James Franklin would have been the perfect fit. And, I think he would have taken the job in a heartbeat. I think that he would have taken that over Virginia Tech pretty quick. When I look at Florida State and James Franklin's resume as a head coach in the Big Ten, it's kind of the same thing that I see with him in taking the Virginia Tech job, playing in what I'd say is a weaker conference than the Big Ten with more resources than what he has at Virginia Tech. Better recruiting by far. Like Florida State has good recruiting. You're competing with Florida, and that's really that. I mean, that's it. Florida State has decent NIL. They have good boosters. Florida State can recruit pretty good. We've seen 5 stars and a lot of 4 stars in and out of there. And, for James Franklin or for Florida State, if he did take that job, you're not having to play the Ohio States and the Michigans every year. The two teams that you typically struggled with and couldn't get past at Penn State. I think that James Franklin would have had this year's Florida State team, or maybe not this year's Florida State team, but after this year, I think that if he took the job, he would have had Florida State in the playoffs nearly every year, if I'm just being honest. Because it is that caliber of school, and you can recruit at that level at Florida State. And I think James Franklin would have, because James Franklin is a good recruiter. And yeah, he has recruited more of that Penn State region, the region that he recruited with Penn State. But we saw him go into the Florida and Georgia, like more in the South, to recruit some his last year or two at Penn State. So that's very, very interesting. Very interesting. I do think that they could have made a big splash, hired James Franklin, and they could have been on the upside for the next several years because that's a spot where I don't really think he's going to get another job after that. I think that if he succeeds at Florida State, you're probably locked in there. Whereas if he succeeds at Virginia Tech, you could possibly get him in another bigger job, just like he did at Vandy and Penn State. But, this move is also very concerning because there's not much more you can lose for Norvell to completely lose the locker room, which he may already have. We don't know. I don't know. I would have to hear from inside sources that he has or haven't. I would assume that there's some guys in that locker room that he's lost, and we'll see some guys at the portal this year. And that's just step one on what you don't want to do as a head coach. You don't want to lose the locker room because he's already lost the fan base. I've seen some uh, Florida State games this year where it's looking mighty empty in that stadium, and I think this is really a move that they had to make because they kind of put themselves in this spot by not making a change or pulling the plug on Norvell earlier in the year when the rumors first started spiking up after week 4 to 5 when you were the only team you had beaten is Alabama. So now the carousel's too deep and you might not have any candidates left out there unless you want to go like the G5 route, which I'm not saying it's a bad thing, but if you're moving on from Mike Norvell, you don't want to go after a guy that maybe has a proven background that can win football games. You had your guy. You had your guy. You're not going to see a guy like James Franklin in the head coaching pool again for a long time, in my opinion, because I think he would have been the top target, and I think they did fumble that opportunity there. But another team who did pull the plug on their head coach is California. Cal fires their head coach. So, like I said, a team, they pulled it fairly early, I'd say. They've fired head coach Justin Wilcox. He's been there for 9 years, 48 and 55 record. This team's had pretty high expectations this year. I wouldn't say through the roof, but I mean, they were higher than what they're performing to, I would say. And they got off to a very good start. Very solid quarterback play from a young guy. Got off to a hot start and just kind of crumbled. Faced a 31-10 loss to Stanford this past weekend, who has been an absolute mess this season. I don't know what's going on with them whatsoever. But I mean, I was honestly sort of shocked at this move at first because I thought they would have rode it out for at least another season, at least with Wilcox. But Cal's general manager Ron Rivera says that he believes it was just time for a change in leadership, some new leadership in the program, which is kind of strange because it wasn't the worst year. Yeah, there was some sloppy play in that Stanford game. Lots of fumbles, lots of just bad football. But and yeah, I guess some of that does have to do with coaching, but I guess you can make the argument because they did start off pretty good. And then they just fell off. It was just a spiral down after that. But anyways, the big takeaway from here is you have a key player on your offense that you need to try and keep, and that is Duran Kiwi Saga. I'm not even gonna attempt. Duran Kiwi Sagapatele. He's already been viewed as a possible transfer candidate, and now it's even more likely. And I think that whoever does get this job, one of their main missions when they first get in the building is try and retain Sagapatele because he has been a game changer for this team, and there's a lot of potential there because he's still so young. There's one name that does jump off the board who I have heard that Cal is already interested in and is already the leading favorite to get the job, and that is Tosh Lapoy from Oregon, defensive coordinator. A lot of people forget that Sagapatele was originally committed to Oregon, and he ended up changing that over to Cal. So he does have ties with that program and these head coaches. Yeah, it was on a different side of the ball, but it doesn't matter. You still have ties with that program, and if you do bring an Oregon staffer in who wouldn't be a bad head coach for a program like Cal, then I think your chances at retaining Sagapatele are much higher, in my opinion, just because of that past relationship that you may have with that coach. Some other names getting tossed around here are Sean Lewis from San Diego State, D'Anton Lynn, defensive coordinator at USC. Maybe they'll make a push for a guy like Alex Golesh or Eric Morris if they don't take the Oklahoma State job. But yeah, that's just kind of what I have for that Cal head coaching situation right now. And kind of a shocker to me when they did move on. I will post a full head coaching search on that pretty soon, probably. Just got to get some candidates together, more in depth. But yeah, some more drama inside the coaching search that seems like it'll never come to an end. But I do think that we're finally coming to a dead end, and I think that we're close to the end of the road, and that's Lane Kiffin. What is he doing? Is he staying at Ole Miss and coaching them through the playoffs or however far they go in this? Is he taking a job at LSU? Is he heading to Gainesville where he has family ties? Well, Keith Carter came out the other day. I believe it was Thursday or Friday. I can't remember one of those days. He's officially finally stated that November 29th, after the Egg Bowl, which is the day after Thanksgiving, the Egg Bowl, it being the day after Thanksgiving, we'll have a decision and an announcement from Lane Kiffin. We don't know if it's an announcement on whether he's leaving or staying at Ole Miss, or if it's a full announcement on like, hey, I'm going to coach at Florida, or hey, I'm going to coach at LSU. We don't know that. We just know that we're getting an announcement on whether he will be back at Ole Miss or not. So, I mean, set your alarms for Sunday morning or Saturday morning because we have a lot of Friday games. Obviously, the Egg Bowl's on Friday this year. But anyways, set your alarms for Saturday morning because it might get a little crazy. Might get pretty wild. You know, the offers he's the offers that Kiffin has been getting lately, they're historic deals in like the 13 to 14 million ballpark range, and that's per year. Apparently, Ole Miss is looking to match that, and also Florida is too. So it's kind of up to Kiffin at this point. Like, where do you want to spend the rest of your life? Where do you want to live the rest of your life? Pretty much. That's pretty much what it came to because you have the same opportunity at every single school. But obviously, you have to look at Ole Miss, you have to look at LSU, and you have to look at Florida. We'll get into that in a minute. So, LSU's deal is reported to be 7 years, at least 90 million. Florida and Ole Miss, like I said, they've both been reported willing to match that. All three teams have also included a roster salary of more than 25 million annually to spend on just talent to bring in, transfer guys, recruits, all that stuff. I mean, it's getting unfair, man. LSU was pulling out all the stops, and they're heavily trending towards being the team to land Kiffin. But like I said, if you if you look at the three schools, you also have to think, even though the money is the same, Kiffin's already said that he's not chasing money. Remember that. Even though the money in the contract seem the same, yeah, you're getting 25 million wherever you go to spend on your roster. It's going to be easier to recruit kids into LSU than it is to Ole Miss. It's going to be easier to recruit kids from Florida to Florida than it is to Ole Miss. And you also have to look at the recruiting grounds. So if you look at the recruiting grounds of Ole Miss, you're competing with like Alabama and Auburn and some teams like that. Whereas Florida, you're the top dog in that state. You're really competing with yourself. Can you go out and land these guys? Because you walk outside and there's 5 stars in your backyard, pretty much. You know, I'd love to see Kiffin's offense with that Florida speed. Go to Ole Miss, or not Ole Miss, but go to LSU. Again, you're the top dog in that country, or you're the top dog in that recruiting grounds. And LSU is also a very premier job because I mean I played high school football. A lot of kids that you talk to on any high school football team, if you ask them their dream school, good portion of them are gonna say Ole Miss. You ask them why? Well, Justin Jefferson went there. Well, Jamar Chase went there. Well, Derek Stingley went there. Well, Odell Beckham went there. Jarvis Landry went there. Joe Burrow went there. Jaden Daniels went there. I mean, the history just goes so deep. Tyrann Mathieu. Yeah, I mean, I can keep going all day. The talent that LSU has had. It's shown to be a school that produces high level talent that goes on and has really big careers in the NFL. And that's what these kids are dreaming to do anyway. And then you put a coach like Lane Kiffin in there. It makes it even better because I would say that Lane Kiffin is probably the most elite name coach that they've had. I would say Lane Kiffin's more elite than Les Miles, in my opinion. Not Saban. Obviously, when they had Saban, I wouldn't say he's more elite than Saban. I'd say he's the most elite since Saban. Ed Orgeron wasn't an elite name. I think Lane Kiffin, if you land a Lane Kiffin, give him Ole Miss, or not Ole Miss, I keep saying Ole Miss. If you land a Lane Kiffin and give him LSU recruiting and money and just that logo on your chest, that's massive. And that's going to change college football just by itself. So that's very interesting. That's a very interesting point there. Now, an SEC school that is focused on their own search, which seems to be coming to a close, is Arkansas. Arkansas has flown under the radar in terms of quality of job after all of these SEC openings that we've seen in like Florida and Auburn and um, LSU, all of these. But I believe that Arkansas is closing in on their guy, or at least their top guys, the top 3 to 4 guys they would like. And I think an announcement could be coming at any point because the dominoes are going to start falling here soon. It's around Thanksgiving time. Transfer portal window is now open. Season last week of the season is this week. Bowl season starts soon. So a lot of these head coaching vacancies will be starting to get filled. So the three that I believe are leading the race for Arkansas is one being Ryan Silverfield from Memphis. Now, if I had to make an official prediction right now, I would say that Arkansas does hire Silverfield. He was the favorite to land the job for a little while there. Done a great job over at Memphis, and like I said, he was the betting favorite for a while, and he's done good at Memphis for a while. It's been more than just 1 or 2 years, like you see from these coaches. But, I think there's real mutual interest there as well. I think that both parties really would like for this deal to take place. So that is my personal prediction. I'm not going to go too in depth, but I do think that Ryan Silverfield that would be my current pick to get this job. The next one that I do think that they're after is Alex Golesh. Golesh was one of the hottest names in the G5 coaching pool for a little while. Starting red hot at USF, and I don't think there will be a problem with him coaching in the SEC or against the top teams in the country because he's already done it. He's already beat these teams. He's already beat some of these teams at USF. And I think it'd be a good hire for Arkansas. He also brings a very good offensive mind to the program and a younger, fiery guy. And I think I just like the fit. I really like the fit there. Another one who has flown under the radar is Eric Morris. So, super quick into Eric Morris. He's elite with quarterbacks. North Texas became one of the more explosive and top offenses in the entire country and definitely in the G5 under Eric Morris. He's produced elite quarterback play at many different levels. I think he's one of the more under radar candidates, and I think it'd be a grand slam to whoever goes out and hires him. I think he'd be a good fit anywhere. He's kind of succeeded everywhere that he's been. He was on that staff with Cliff Kingsbury that developed Patrick Mahomes. He found Cam Ward in his D2 school. He found the kid at Virginia right now, Chandler Morris. He was at North Texas last year and had a great year under Eric Morris. So that's a big candidate for Arkansas. Another one who's kind of a wild card, but I do think that they've interviewed him. I've heard that they've interviewed him, is Ed Orgeron. Like I said, they've interviewed him. They spoke with Orgeron. He's expressed that he wants to get back into coaching here soon, and I think the culture fit is there. He has SEC experience, so I think that is there. He has experience at the top level. He's won national championships. I think it'd be interesting, and I really like the fit of that as well. Some other names, or another name that has been floated around more so the past few days is Pat Fitzgerald. You know, if you think of the name Pat Fitzgerald and you remember what he did at Northwestern, you would think that's a decent hire until you look at his last 2 years when the NIL era really started to slowly ramp up. Wasn't so hot with Pat Fitzgerald. I think they should stay away from him. I think that he might get a job somewhere else. I don't think it's Arkansas, and I don't think that Arkansas should go that route. I think Silverfield, Golesh, or Morris are the top three. I know that there is interest in Orgeron. I don't. I think that interest has faded. I do think right now is between the top three that I named, so they're probably going the G5 route. And yeah, I don't think any of these would be bad hires for Arkansas. It's who can come in and recruit the Texas grounds. Because you're recruiting a lot of Texas. You're not too far from Texas. So you're competing with Texas, obviously. You're competing with now Texas Tech, now Texas A&M. You're not the hot topic of your recruiting grounds. Eric Morris, listen here, Eric Morris. He's at North Texas right now. He's recruited very well at North Texas, and he can develop talent that aren't supposed to be at that high level. If you're Arkansas, I think you go out and hire Eric Morris. Um, that's just my opinion. I think you go out and do it because that's exactly what you need. But we'll see. I think Silverfield and Golesh are also two great hires. Orgeron as well. So that's kind of what I have for Arkansas. Now, a school that they've been sort of quiet in their head coaching search is Penn State, but I think it's coming to a close as well. We haven't heard much at all, like ever since the firing of James Franklin, as to what direction they're going, and I don't even know if Pat Kraft really knows. Maybe he is cooking up something behind the scenes, but I don't know, and I don't think he knows. Um, but based on the latest rumors and rumblings that I've heard from people inside, or not inside, but close to Penn State, is it seems to be coming down to Bob Chesney from James Madison and intern head coach Terry Smith. A lot of Penn State fans are against the idea of Chesney, but personally, I don't think it's that bad of a hire whatsoever. I think Chesney would be a really good hire. Um, Chesney's been really good at James Madison. Even he's even recruited very well there. I mean, they've had a four-star receiver commit to a G5 school. You're doing something right. Now, he does have Pennsylvania ties. He's recruited that, or he can recruit that region that Penn State typically recruits in. You know, I think he'd be able to do well. I think he'd be able to do very well in all aspects. He's shown that he's a good head coach. And if you have it, you're either a good head coach or you're not. I think that people kind of overthink stepping up a level, like going from the G5 to the Big Ten. If you look at a lot of these big head coaches in college football, some of them came from the G5 route. If they didn't come from the G5 route, they came from a coordinator route. And if you look at Kurt Signetti, I know it's not a good comparison. He came from James Madison. James Madison's been a good coaching tree. Like I said, I know it's not okay to compare those two because obviously Signetti has more experience at the top level before taking the James Madison job than Bob Chesney does. But if you do look at their past, outside of Signetti having some experience at a very high level before that, he's also succeeded at every level that he's been. He's been to the D2 route. He's been to the G5 route. He's been to the FCS route. There's Chesney's done the same thing. There's some similarities there. I think that people are sleeping on Bob Chesney. I think people are very much sleeping on Bob Chesney. If you do a little bit deeper research, I think you could talk yourself into really liking the Bob Chesney move. And I do think if he gets on campus and if they do make that hire, I think people are going to start to fall in love with him pretty quick. He also, I think that he could bring in some guys from James Madison. They'll fill in some gaps from the roster. Yeah, he's not going to bring over the whole roster because that's probably not going to work. But Signetti did it. Look at that college football playoff team that Indiana had that first year he was there. And what led to this now? He went out. He brought a lot of his guys from James Madison they wanted to keep. They made the college football playoffs. Now look what they are. Now look where they're at. Chesney's shown that he could be a program builder, and that's what Penn State is going to need because they are in a very tough spot right now. He's a younger guy, and he knows the new era of football, which has been proven to work well in all levels of the game. Now, Terry Smith, the players are rallying around him. They're starting to get hot right here at the end of the season. Players are holding up signs after wins, after a big win against Nebraska. Their signs are saying, hire Terry Smith. Here's my question though: if I think if you fire a good head coach in James Franklin, the idea is to upgrade. I don't know if there's any upgrades left. So you're kind of gonna have to take a chance on on hiring a guy that is like a boom or bust project, like Bob Chesney or like Terry Smith, and I think that's the route that they've kind of gotten themselves stuck at. I think Terry's done a great job. I'd personally hire Chesney, keep Terry on the staff, make him a GM or something, like give him a higher role and more involvement than what he previously had before he did get promoted to intern head coach. But I think if you keep Terry on the staff, you hire Chesney, you have a good ball coach, you have extra good recruiting. I think you got something rolling there. I think that Penn State would have something rolling there. There's other names still being floated around. Eli Drinkwitz is one. Looked like he was the guy for a minute, but that kind of faded as Missouri kind of cooled off as of late. Which, yeah, their quarterback did go down, but still, I mean, they just didn't look so hot. He doesn't have that good of a track record against the top teams. Maybe he would be better in the Big Ten because he is an offensive mind and he would be one of the probably better offenses in the Big Ten. They also have a good defense over at Missouri. I don't know. It kind of depends on the staff that you bring in. Clark Lee is also being floated around. I think he stays at Vandy. I think that's kind of out of the question. But at this point, I'd be shocked if it weren't Chesney. And I think that we'll know something very soon. I've heard before December, I've heard they want something around the Thanksgiving time. It's currently around the Thanksgiving time. So we'll see. I mean, we'll see what happens with Penn State. It's been very quiet. Talk a little NFL for a minute. So the Shedeur Sanders era has began in Cleveland as he gets his first NFL start, first pro start, and he gets his first win in that start. He's now been announced for the starter next week as well. First Browns quarterback as a rookie to get his win, or no, first Browns quarterback to win his first start since 1999. So good accomplishment there for Shedeur. They beat the Raiders 24-10. Yeah, Raiders aren't a good team, but still, rookie quarterback. Kevin Stefanski said he's had like no first team reps. Got to give him some credit. 11 for 20, 209 yards, one touchdown, one interception, passing rating 87.3. He had a big play in there where he was under some pressure, escaped the pocket, hit Isaiah Bond downfield for a 52-yard completion. Like I said, Stefanski came out and he said Shedeur hasn't practiced or played with the first team at all. So pretty impressive to come out there and win despite Myles Garrett being an absolute monster. He's having a record-breaking year. Is Shedeur the future for the Browns? I don't know. We've only seen a sample size. If you look back at the draft that he was in, he was being talked about as a pretty highly rated quarterback. And then some off-field antics kind of did tank his draft stock. Yeah, there was still some scouts and experts that did look at his tape and say, yeah, I don't think he would be the best fit in the NFL. We'll see. We'll see because I mean they did say the same thing when Shedeur was at when he was at Jackson State, making the move to Colorado. They said that the Division I football would be too much for him. I mean, he played well to me. He played perfectly fine to me. So we'll see. We'll see. It's very interesting, and I am glad to see him on the field. I think it adds some hype to that Cleveland team that is not so great. So yeah, I mean, we'll kind of see what happens with Shedeur in Cleveland as the season goes. We have a few more weeks of him left. So yeah. Oh wait, breaking news: the dominoes are starting to fall. Oklahoma State is hiring Eric Morris from North Texas. So, Oklahoma State, before I could even do a coaching search video on them, they found their guy. Eric Morris, we were just hyping him up on the podcast a second ago. Literally just hyping him up. I checked my phone before I log out of here and see that this news breaks. So, let's get into a little bit of Eric Morris off the dome. Just off the dome. I do have some stats pulled up. I do. But mainly off the dome. So, people often forget how good of a job was sitting here. You know, one of the top jobs in the Big 12 was Oklahoma State. People completely looked over after the hirings of um, LSU, Florida, Auburn, Penn State, all those came about. Um, in my opinion, this is a slam dunk hire for Oklahoma State. You know, what what Morris brings to the table? Well, first off, incredible offensive mind, like we just talked about. Go check out the numbers he's putting up in the G5 this season with North Texas. 2023 North Texas. Let's just go over some stats. 2023 North Texas ranked 6th in the FBS in total offense. 2024 even better. 3rd in total offense nationally. 4th in passing offense, 23rd in scoring offense. Isn't bad when they're in the G5. Through his 26 games at North Texas, offense top 500 yards of total offense in 13 games. Saying a lot. Saying a lot. Why is my mic muted? There we there we go. Should still be good. All right, so in 2024, they set a record. They set a program record with 300. They averaged 328.2 passing yards per game. Total yardage in 2024, 488.8 yards per game. That was run and pass, obviously. Um, Points wise, they've averaged 33.5 points per game in 2024. That's even higher this year. 2023, they had a 3,000 yard passer, 1,000 yard rusher, and a 1,000 yard receiver all in the same year, which in college football, you don't see that much, especially with numbers that high. So he's turned North Texas into one of the more explosive offenses in the entire country and definitely in the G5, I would say. Um, the most intriguing part to me is this guy, he has an eye for a quarterback. Listen to this track record for just a second. So he was on the staff at Texas Tech with Cliff Kingsbury, helped develop Patrick Mahomes. He then went on to be a head coach at D2 school where Cam Ward ended up being before he transferred to Washington State and Miami. So Cam Ward's hype really started with Eric Morris, and then he went on to be the number one pick in the NFL draft. He coached Chandler Morris at North Texas, who is now at Virginia Tech, having himself a very solid season. How about right now? Drew Mestemaker, redshirt freshman who was never highly recruited. You know, Morris went out and found him as a not a big recruit, and he's one of the leading passers in the entire country. And if I had to make a prediction right now, he's going to hit the portal and he's going to follow him right to Oklahoma State and get that starting job right away. And I think he's going to be great there because you still have multiple years of development there. If there's anybody that you would trust with that, it's Eric Morris. So he's had success. He's had success at every spot that he's landed. You know, Oklahoma needed a change. They needed a new era, and Morris brings that. Not an old man, so he does bring youthful energy that the players will really rally around, and I think the recruits will like it as well. He can recruit the Texas area, like we were just mentioning with the Arkansas job. Um, you're going to need to recruit the Texas area, and you're not going to be able to get the top recruits, so you're going to have to just find talent and develop them. That's what Eric Morris has done at North Texas so far. So he brings an offensive identity to your program, which who doesn't like a good offensive mind who's going to bring out some explosive offenses? I think it's a slam dunk hire for Oklahoma State. I think they could have made a better move for the situation that they were in. You know, there were lots of teams giving Eric Morris looks, like we mentioned earlier. Arkansas was one of them. I think it came down to him and Alex Golesh, and think Oklahoma State killed it here. That's my take on the hiring of Eric Morris. I'll go more in depth maybe on another video. I think that was just some quick facts for you to know if you're an Oklahoma State fan. So get pretty excited. In my opinion, I think the future is bright there. So that'll do it for this episode. I'll have another one out tomorrow before Thanksgiving. Or no, on Thanksgiving. No, before Thanksgiving. Yeah, I'll have one out tomorrow before Thanksgiving, previewing some games for Thanksgiving Day and stuff. So keep an eye for that. So I won't say happy Thanksgiving on this one because I will have another one coming out. So yeah, be on the lookout for that one tomorrow.